Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission, as always, is to take these sometimes fragmented, sometimes really compelling sources, reports, interviews, even classified notes, and kind of piece them together for you. Try to build a coherent picture.
Right. And today, we're not just talking about, blurry lights in the sky.
Yeah.
We're digging into some incredibly detailed, often multi-witness accounts, sometimes military, sometimes civilian, encounters with UFOs or UAPs, as they're now often called.
Yeah, documented events, things that left a mark, often quite literally on the people involved and sometimes on the environment.
Exactly. We've gathered reports from, all over the place. Zimbabwe, Brazil, the U.S., involving military pilots, doctors, school kids. The idea is to cut through the noise, the sensationalism, and really focus on the core information.
What do these sources actually say? What are the facts on the ground based on the testimony?
We're looking at the specifics, the kinematics, how these things moved in ways that just, defy physics as we know it. The consistency in witness accounts, sometimes decades later, and frankly, some pretty unsettling patterns that start to show up when you line these cases up side by side.
We're trying to unpack the raw data, the physical descriptions people gave, these repeated instances of nonverbal, maybe telepathic communication, and the cover-ups, the documented efforts to suppress this stuff right after it happens.
Yeah, it's all about understanding the phenomenon itself. What does the evidence suggest about its technology, its behavior, and maybe most importantly, what's the impact on the people who experience these things? It's often profound, life-changing.
It's like assembling a huge puzzle, isn't it? You've got these completely separate pieces, a schoolyard in Africa, a high-security military range, a dark forest in South America, the skies off the U.S. coast.
Totally different context. On their own, they're just bizarre stories, maybe easy to dismiss one by one.
But when you start putting them together, when you see the connections,
that's when this, frankly, this deeply unsettling picture starts to emerge. A global picture.
And it really pushes up against not just our science, but also makes you question the lengths some global intelligence groups go to when, evidence of something genuinely not human seems to be found.
Right. There's a pattern of containment that's hard to ignore.
Okay, we've got a lot to get through. This is going to be a pretty deep dive, so let's start with the first one. This one is, it's pretty staggering in scale. Okay, first up. A case that completely blows up the idea that these things only happen late at night to one person on a lonely road. This was broad daylight, over 100 witnesses, all at the same time.
Yeah, we're talking about the aerial school landing. Rua, Zimbabwe, 1994.
Just the scale of it is mind-boggling.
It really is, and that's why it's such a cornerstone case. Think about it. Over 100 kids out playing during their lunch break. Bright sunny day, we know the place, we know the time. Dozens and dozens of independent witnesses seeing the same thing.
I read that the filmmaker who first investigated initially just couldn't believe it. 100 kids, surely everyone would know.
Exactly. It sounds too big to be true, right? But the evidence suggests it absolutely did happen. And a huge part of why we can say that with some confidence is who got involved almost immediately. Dr. John Mack, Pulitzer Prize winner, Harvard psychiatrist, highly respected, known for being meticulous, careful, not someone prone to, flights of fancy.
And he was there very quickly, wasn't he? Interviewing the children. Why is that timing so important?
Oh, it's crucial. It drastically reduces the chance of what researchers call testimonial contamination. Kids hearing things on the news, parents talking, teachers maybe guiding the narrative, even unintentionally.
Right, stories get shaped over time.
Exactly. But Mack and his team were there within days, interviewing these children on camera, while the memory, the experience, was incredibly fresh, incredibly raw.
And what did they find? What were the kids saying?
Well, the consistency was remarkable. They captured it in the kids' drawings, in their words.
Yeah.
A consistent story emerged. A large metallic-looking craft landing near the edge of the playground. And these beings, silent, dark-eyed beings getting out.
And these kids were from different backgrounds, speaking in different languages.
Yeah, Shona and Pendabelle primarily, plus English. Getting 100 kids, especially younger ones, in that kind of environment, rural Zimbabwe in the 90s, no instant messaging to coordinate such a detailed, specific story. Extremely unlikely. Impossible, really.
But the real power, the source material suggests, comes from looking at it long term, the follow-up study.
Absolutely. That's the clincher for many people. Our source details how, 20 years later, many of these same individuals were tracked down. They were adults now, living all over the world, different jobs, different lives. And when they recounted the event 2 decades on, the emotional impact was still palpable. The consistency remained, but more than that, It was the feeling behind it. They described it almost like a shared religious experience, something that fundamentally shifted how they saw the world, their place in it.
Wow. So not just a memory, but something deeply embedded.
Exactly. You could see it wasn't a performance, wasn't a story they just kept repeating. It was a real event, whether traumatic or profound or both, that they had lived through together. The consensus, the depth of emotion after all that time. It's powerful evidence.
Okay, but maybe the most startling part, the thing that really stands out, was this telepathic message.
Yeah, this is where it gets really strange and deeply significant. The majority of the children, almost all of them, apparently reported receiving the exact same message. Not spoken words, but delivered directly into their minds.
A warning?
A clear warning. An existential one, focused on our relationship with technology.
What was the core message? Can you break it down?
It boiled down to this. Technology itself is becoming a major problem. Not all technology, perhaps, but certain paths, certain actions we're taking, they will eventually ruin the Earth, lead to destruction.
Okay, that's heavy. Especially coming from beings who presumably arrived using incredibly advanced technology.
That's the paradox, isn't it? They possess tech far beyond ours, yet they're warning us about ours. It's a philosophical challenge wrapped in a high strangeness event.
So let's chew on that for a second. If you're an advanced species and you have this critical, maybe planet-saving message, why deliver it to 100 school kids in rural Zimbabwe? Why not, land on the lawn of the UN or beam it onto every TV screen?
It's a huge question. And the sources offer a couple of interpretations, really just educated guesses. One is, maybe they just don't grasp human social structures. The beings were described as being about the same height as the older children, right?
Yes.
So perhaps from their perspective, they saw the children as the local adults, or maybe just the most mentally open or receptive individuals there. It suggests a communication gap, maybe a fundamental difference in how societies are organized. Or the second idea, which seems maybe more plausible, is that it was a calculated choice, deliberately choosing what one source called a benign environment.
Benign, meaning less threatening.
Exactly. Think about it. Landing on a school playground full of children, it's far less likely to trigger an immediate hostile military response compared to, say, appearing over Washington, D.C. or Moscow.
So they weren't being naive, they were being strategic, choosing the path of least resistance or least threat.
Potentially. Seeking vulnerability, seeking innocence as the channel for a message of global importance, it completely flips the script on the common assumption that UAPs are only here to surveil or intimidate. Here, the primary interaction was communication, a warning about our own behavior.
And this idea of landing near schools, it wasn't a one-off, was it? The source mentions another big case.
Right, the Westall incident, Australia, 1966. Similar scenario, different continent, different decade. Around 300 witnesses this time, students and teachers, saw a disc-shaped craft land near their school.
300, wow.
Yeah, so you see this pattern emerging. Schools as landing sites, or maybe observation points. Why? We can only speculate. Maybe it is about observing societal development at a fundamental level. Maybe it's just finding places less likely to get shot at immediately. Whatever the reason, the repetition itself is a data point we can't just ignore. It suggests intent, a strategy.
Okay, let's shift gears now from that relatively peaceful, though deeply weird telepathic warning to something much more visceral, physical, terrifying actually. Capture, death, and what looks like a massive cover-up operation involving multiple countries.
Yeah, prepare yourself because this next one is intense. It's the Virginia UFO incident, Brazil, 1996.
Virginia. This one feels different, much more grounded.
It stands out because it's probably the most well-documented case we have of physical encounter, where the evidence, in this case, an actual being, was allegedly recovered by military forces, almost immediately.
So, set the scene. How did it start?
It starts with three young women. Katya, she was 21, and two sisters, Liliana and Belkia, who were 16 and 14. Early afternoon, walking home, they cut through this vacant lot, and near a low cinder block wall, they saw something crouched down.
Not an animal.
Definitely not an animal they recognized. The descriptions are pretty consistent, about 3 to 5 feet tall, dark, oily, reddish-brown skin, very large red eyes, and these sort of 3 small bumps or protrusions on its head. No hair, no real nose or ears visible in the typical sense.
And its condition, was it threatening?
Quite the opposite, according to the witnesses. This is crucial. They stressed it looked weak, feeble, maybe injured, and terrified. It seemed incapacitated, maybe struggling with the environment, the atmosphere, something.
And then there was this moment of connection, right, between Katya, the oldest, and the creature.
Yeah, that's the part that just Gets under your skin. Despite how alien it looked, the interaction reported was deeply, almost painfully human. Katya apparently froze, locked eyes with it, and she said she received this desperate telepathic message. A plea.
What was the plea?
Please help me, I'm scared. Just that. Simple, direct, full of fear.
Wow. Not take me to your leader, but help me.
Exactly. It paints a picture not of invasion, but of distress, of vulnerability. The younger sister apparently panicked and ran, but Katya felt sort of held there for a moment by this overwhelming sense of the creature's fear and pain.
Okay, but there's another sensory detail here that takes this from just a strange sighting into something almost like biological horror.
The smell.
Oh, the smell, yeah. This is reported by multiple people connected to the events, not just the initial witnesses. The descriptions are intense, putrid, nasty, ammoniac, some said, overwhelmingly strong.
How strong are we talking? I mean, one account tried to quantify it, saying it was like 100,000 times worse than a skunk. Whether that's literal or not, the point is, it wasn't just unpleasant, it was described as almost paralyzing, physically sickening.
And it wasn't just around the creature itself.
No. The sources confirm when the creature, or possibly a second one, was later transported, apparently ending up briefly at a local regional hospital. The stench was so bad, they had to completely close off that entire wing. For days, maybe weeks, it required serious decontamination.
That's incredible. And it wasn't just environmental contamination, right? Didn't the mother of the sisters experience it directly?
Yes, Martha, the mother. Her testimony is powerful. She went to the site, the vacant lot, after the creature had reportedly been removed by the military. And she said the stench was still so strong, so pervasive, that it basically permeated her nasal passages. She couldn't wash it out. It lingered, she said, for about a week.
A whole week, just from being near the site later.
Yeah. That level of biological residue, or whatever it was, it speaks volumes. It suggests something about the entity's biology, or maybe its propulsion system, or maybe decay. Who knows? But it's a visceral, physical detail that's really hard to take.
Yeah.
This wasn't just a story. It was a documented sensory assault requiring medical intervention and large-scale cleaning.
Okay, so the creature is seen, it smells awful, it seems distressed, then the military gets involved. How quickly?
Very quickly. Within the maybe 2 hours of the girl's sighting, we have accounts from military police officers Marco Scherzi and Eric Lopes. They were on patrol, apparently alerted that there was something unusual in the area.
So they were looking for it?
Seems like it. They spotted a creature, possibly the same one, maybe another trying to cross a road. And Scherzi, apparently acting on, I don't know, instinct or orders, just jumped out of the vehicle and grabbed it. Barehanded.
Grabbed it?
Grabbed it. Put it in the back of their vehicle. This confirms a rapid, organized search and recovery operation was already underway. This wasn't accidental.
And then the creature gets moved around. Hospitals, clinics.
Yeah, confusing trail. Apparently it was taken to a small local clinic first, then the regional hospital we mentioned, then maybe a more specialized hospital, before disappearing onto a military base. But we have some crucial corroborating testimony from people directly involved in that chain.
Like the doctor.
Right, Dr. Marco Leal. He was a doctor at the regional hospital. His testimony confirms the scene. Military trucks everywhere, armed guards, this incredibly tense atmosphere, a total lockdown. He was explicitly ordered to take x-rays of a black body bag.
He didn't see what was inside.
Never saw the contents, wasn't allowed to. And the x-ray images, seized immediately by the military personnel. Yeah. He never saw them either. So his testimony confirms direct military control over the medical examination or attempted examination of whatever was in that bag. They were managing the evidence tightly.
Okay, so that's the medical side. What about the military logistics? Where did it go next?
That's where another key witness comes in. Marco Fedesfides, who's a military control officer. His testimony, according to the sources, confirms the final steps of the Brazilian part of the operation. He reported that an unauthorized U.S. Air Force plane landed at Campinas Airport.
Unauthorized, like off the books.
Apparently. And the contents from Virginia the creature presumably were transferred via 2 helicopters onto this USAF plane. And then it flew straight to the United States.
And the trail goes cold there.
Predictably, yes. So Fee's testimony confirms the handover, an international recovery operations system. Seizure in Brazil, immediate transfer to U.S. control. All hidden behind this flimsy official story the authorities put out about finding a local mentally disabled man, which nobody believed.
The cover story is almost always ridiculous, isn't it?
Often, yeah. Designed to obscure, not convince.
But the cover-up didn't stop with just controlling the physical evidence. There was direct intimidation of the witnesses. The men in dark suits, MIB.
Ah, yes, the MIB. This is where it gets really dark, really personal for the family. The mother, Martha, her testimony about this is apparently incredibly powerful, very emotional. The source investigator we drew from, who'd been doing this for like 25 years, said her raw distress was the first time he felt he had to report on the MIB phenomenon, despite all the baggage and ridicule that usually comes with MIB stories.
Because her fear felt genuine.
Completely genuine. He was convinced she was recounting a real, terrifying experience.
So what happened? What did these men do?
It was blatant bribery and intimidation. According to Martha, these men described as well-dressed, possibly foreign, definitely not local authorities approached her. They offered her a briefcase, literally full of US $100 bills, a life-changing amount of money.
In exchange for what?
In exchange for her daughters publicly retracting their story. Just say they made it all up, they lied. The money, plus relocation for the whole family, was theirs if they just recanted.
Wow! That's heavy pressure, a briefcase full of cash.
It's extreme. It shows how desperately someone wanted this story silenced. This wasn't a gentle request. It was high-level, internationally coordinated coercion, using agents who seemed to operate outside normal legal channels, offering vast sums of money. It screams containment at all costs. They weren't investigating, they were suppressing.
That Virginia case, it's just chilling on so many levels. The fear of the creature, the smell, the military lockdown, the MIB, it feels disturbingly real.
It does. It has layers of corroboration, civilian, medical, military, and a level of physical interaction and subsequent suppression that's hard to find elsewhere.
Okay, let's move from Brazil back to the US. Another encounter involving the military, but this time near perhaps the most famous secretive base in the world, Area 51. And it links a strange craft sighting with a face-to-face encounter with a very bizarre entity.
Right, this is the Nellis Test Range entity encounter, also from 1994, interestingly, same year as aerial school.
And the timing wasn't random, was it? There was a UFO sighting right before this.
That's the context. Shortly before this ground encounter, there was that video of the Nellis Test Range UFO footage from 94. It showed this craft moving very erratically, very quickly. And crucially, the automated tracking systems on the range were having trouble locking onto it. The computers couldn't predict its movement. So the whole area was already kind of on high alert, buzzing with this high strangeness activity.
So what happened on the ground? A convoy?
Yeah, a convoy. Apparently engineers or maybe military personnel connected to the range, driving on a remote dirt road near Beatty, Nevada, which is close to the Nellis Range boundaries. And they come across this figure standing by the road.
A person.
At first glance, maybe, but immediately things felt wrong. The figure was wearing U.S. military BDU's battle dress uniforms, but they were described as immaculately clean. Pristine.
Which would be weird after.
Extremely weird. On a dusty Nevada test range. A uniform that clean stands out like a sore thumb. It felt instantly out of place, suggesting maybe camouflage or some kind of imitation. Like he was trying to look like a soldier, but didn't quite get the details right.
But the uniform wasn't the only strange thing. The being itself.
Oh, far from human. The physical description is deeply unsettling. The skin was very pale, almost translucent, with this distinct bluish undertone. The witness compared it to an albino person suffering from severe hypothermia.
And the facial features.
That's where it gets really alien. The witness reported no visible external ears, just smooth skin where ears should be. And the eyes. They were described as twice the size of normal human eyes, huge, dark, and stretching way back towards the temples. They looked like a human soldier in some ways, but fundamentally, structurally wrong. Almost like a broken mannequin trying to pass as real.
I read that one of the people in the convoy actually started to help, thinking it was a soldier in trouble.
Yeah, that initial human reaction kicked in, saw the BDU, the pale skin, thought maybe hypothermia, which can happen even in the desert at night. The witness apparently started taking off his own jacket to offer it, until his colleague yelled, pointing out the ears, or the lack of them. That was the moment the penny dropped. This wasn't a human in distress. This was something else entirely, just wearing the uniform.
And did it communicate? Virginia had telepathy. What about this one?
Fascinatingly, yes, but in a mixed way. The entity apparently did make sounds, like it was trying to speak, but the sounds were described as completely unintelligible. Just garbled noise, gibberish.
But they understood it anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The witness reported that even though the speech made no sense, the meaning, the actual message, flowed directly into his mind, clearly, telepathically. It was like the sounds were just static or maybe a formality, but the real communication was mind to mind. The thought itself was the language.
Incredible. So what was the message? What did this being want?
It made a very specific request. It asked for tritium.
Tritium.
Yeah, which the analysts involved pretty quickly concluded was almost certainly a mispronunciation or garbled version of tritium.
Tritium. Okay, why is that significant? What is tritium used for?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting and strategically sensitive. Tritium is a radioactive isotope of hydrogen. It's rare, it decays relatively quickly, and it has two main uses, poles apart, really.
Which are?
On the high end, it's a crucial component in nuclear weapons. Specifically, it's used to boost the yield of fission bombs and is essential for modern thermonuclear weapons. Very military, very strategic.
Okay, and the other end?
The other end, it's used to make things glow in the dark. Think luminous watch dials, exit signs, that kind of thing, because it emits low-energy beta particles.
So this entity in military gear is asking for a material used in nuclear bombs and glow sticks.
Precisely. The contrast is bizarre. Does it need a key nuclear weapons component, or does it just need a long-lasting light source? The request itself is deeply ambiguous.
What did the witness say? Did they offer to help?
Well, the witness, knowing they were very close to the Nevada test site in Dreamland Area 51, basically suggested the entity should head towards the base, towards Dreamland, to get help or find what it needed.
And the entity's reaction to mentioning Area 51?
This is another powerful moment. The witness reported receiving an instant, overwhelming wave of mental disgust, revulsion coming from the entity. And the thought conveyed was absolutely clear. The military, the people at that base, were barbarians and murderers.
Wow. So it needs tritium, possibly for weapons tech, but despises the military who developed those weapons.
Exactly. It's an incredible philosophical contradiction. Holding this high moral judgment against the military apparatus, calling them barbarians, while simultaneously seeking a material intrinsically linked to their most destructive creations. It echoes the Ariel school message, maybe. A critique of humanity's use of technology, delivered by a being seemingly caught up in it.
This is just layers upon layers of weirdness. But it wasn't just the one witness who experienced this, right? What about the others in the vehicle?
This adds another layer of strangeness and control. The primary witness, the one who had the telepathic exchange, looked over at his friends in the vehicle during or after the encounter, and he described them as completely zonked out, like zombies. Drooling, vacant stares.
Incapacitated.
Totally incapacitated. Mentally shut down, it seemed. And here's the kicker. Afterwards, those other individuals had absolutely no memory of the encounter. None whatsoever.
Or missing time.
Or wiped memory. It strongly suggests targeted memory suppression. The entity, or whatever technology it employed, seemed able to isolate the communication to the one witness it intended to speak with, while effectively switching off the others and erasing their recall of the event. That implies an incredible level of psychic or technological control over human consciousness. Protect the message bearer, erase the others. Chillingly efficient.
Okay, let's pivot now. We've had mass sightings, physical encounters, alleged captures, telepathic messages. Now let's look at what happens when the most advanced military sensors we have are turned on these phenomena. We're heading to the east coast of the US around 2014 onwards, and the experiences of Navy pilots like Ryan Graves.
Right. This is where we get into hard data, the sensor readings, the stuff that's much harder to dismiss as misidentification or hallucination. And interestingly, this whole wave of Navy UAP reporting seems to have been triggered by a technological upgrade.
A new radar system.
Exactly. The Navy fighter jets, the FA-18s, were transitioning from their older radar, the APG-73, to the much more advanced APG-79 system.
And you described this difference before. It's not just a small step up, is it?
Not at all. It's like going from an old fuzzy analog TV set to a state-of-the-art high-definition digital OLED display. A quantum leap in capability.
Can you break that down? What could the new radar do that the old one couldn't in terms of spotting these UAPs?
Okay, so the old APG-73 used a mechanically scanned array. That means a physical dish had to swing back and forth to paint the sky with radar waves. It was slower, had lower processing power, lower resolution. It often filtered out things it considered clutter or noise, things that were too small, too fast, or moving too erratically.
So I might have literally just ignored the UAPs.
Very possibly. Now, the APG-79 uses a ESA, active electronically scanned array. No moving parts. It steers the radar beams electronically, almost instantaneously. It has vastly higher resolution, can track hundreds of targets at once, and crucially processes way more data much faster.
So when they switched it on?
When they switched it on and learned how to use its full capabilities, suddenly the pilot started seeing things, lots of things. Things that, it became clear, had probably been there all along. The radar upgrade didn't attract the UAPs. It just finally allowed the pilots to see what was already sharing their airspace.
Okay, so the UAPs weren't new, just newly visible to the Navy pilots. And what the radar showed them, it just didn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
Talk about the kinematics, the movement.
Right, kinematics is just the physics of motion. Where something is, how fast it's going, and which way it's heading, that's the velocity vector. Now, any normal aircraft, even a sophisticated drone, uses a flight computer to fly efficiently. Usually that means a pretty straight line from A to B, maybe gentle turns.
Predictable movement.
Predictable. What the APG-79 started picking up was, well, anomalous. These objects often had flight paths that seemed much less controlled, almost meandering. They'd move up, down, side to side in 3 dimensions, not following efficient routes. Their velocity vectors would sometimes change almost instantly, implying accelerations or changes in direction that would crush a human pilot and should be impossible for any conventional aircraft.
G-force is off the chart.
Way off the charts. But here's the paradox. Sometimes these same objects would demonstrate incredibly disciplined, efficient flight patterns.
The racetrack pattern.
Exactly. That's a standard aviation pattern. You fly a straight leg, make a sharp, efficient 180-degree turn, fly back straight, turn again. It maximizes time flying straight and level, minimizing energy wasted on maneuvering. Pilots use it for holding patterns, surveillance, things like that.
And the UAPs were doing this.
Repeatedly.
Yeah.
And for incredible lengths of time. The sources mentioned pilots tracking these objects flying perfect racetrack patterns for up to 13 hours continuously.
13 hours? That implies some serious endurance.
Or energy source. Massive energy reserves, seemingly. It suggests a controlled, persistent presence, not just random blips. They were loitering, observing maybe, in a very energy-efficient way when they weren't demonstrating impossible physics.
Okay, but the detail that really seems to break the laws of physics, the one that pilots and scientists keep coming back to, is their ability to just stop and stay stopped against the wind.
This is probably the single most compelling piece of kinematic data. We're talking about altitudes where the wind is often fierce. Weather data confirmed winds at the flight levels where these objects were seen often reached 120 knots. That's like 140 miles per hour.
Hurricane force winds, basically.
Pretty much. And wind isn't steady, right? It gusts, it swirls, it changes direction and intensity constantly. For any physical object, a balloon, a drone, even a hypothetical advanced aircraft using thrusters to maintain perfect, absolute stillness, zero movement relative to the ground in those conditions. It's considered impossible by conventional aerodynamics and physics.
Couldn't some advanced propulsion, like counter-thrusting rockets, do it?
Theoretically, you could try. But think about the energy required. You'd need constant, massive, and incredibly precise adjustments from powerful thrusters fighting every gust. That would generate enormous heat signatures, visible exhaust plumes, turbulence, things the pilot's sensors should have picked up.
But they didn't see any of that.
No. The reports consistently state the objects just hung there, perfectly stationary. As Ryan Graves put it, it wasn't like they were fighting the wind. It was like the wind just wasn't affecting them, as if they were existing in a bubble of calm space or somehow manipulating the space-time around them so the wind became irrelevant. That's where you get into really exotic physics territory.
Immune to 140 mile per hour winds. Okay, so eventually they got more than just radar tracks. They got eyeballs on these things.
Yes. The first confirmed visual sighting in this series of incidents happened when one of these objects flew directly between 2 FA-18s that were flying in formation, right as they entered the designated training airspace, close enough to get a good look.
And what did they see? This is the famous description, isn't it?
It is, and it's highly specific, which is important because it matches descriptions from other unrelated reports sometimes. They described it as a dark gray or black cube inside a clear, translucent sphere.
A cube in a sphere.
Yeah, with the corners of the inner cube apparently touching the inner surface of the outer sphere, moving as one single integrated object.
That's geometrically bizarre. Aerodynamically, a cube and a sphere behave totally differently. How could they fly together like that?
Nobody knows. It defies easy explanation. Is the sphere a containment field? Is the cube the actual device? Is it one object that just looks like two? We don't know. But the specificity of that visual cube in a sphere is a recurring theme, and it confirms these aren't just weather balloons or known aircraft. It's something structured, something manufactured, and something deeply strange.
It's the contradictions, isn't it? It can stay perfectly still in a hurricane, but it can also fly at incredible speeds. It looks like simple shapes, but combined in impossible ways.
Exactly. Paradoxical kinematics. That's the signature.
All right, let's step back in time again to a case that's become almost legendary in UFO lore. High strangeness, physical evidence, And a really intriguing geological angle. We're talking about Travis Walton, 1975.
Ah, Travis Walton. Yeah, this one is a classic partly because of the multiple witnesses, his logging crew, and the physical aftermath. It starts deep in the woods, Sitgreaves National Forest, Arizona, after dark.
How did it begin? What caught their attention?
They were driving home after a long day of logging, and they see this light through the trees. Not a spotlight, not headlights. Described as this eerie, golden, sort of diffuse glow, illuminating the whole clearing ahead of them, like the air itself was lit up.
And then they saw the source of the light.
Yeah. They got closer and saw the craft itself, hovering silently above the ground. Walton described it as a classic disc shape, kind of like two plates joined together, one inverted on top of the other. Interestingly, years later, that description closely matched alleged diagrams of a craft called the Sport Model, described by
Bob Lazar from Area 51.
the very same, a visual echo across decades and contexts.
Okay, and the sound, or lack thereof. So many reports mention silence.
This one was different, not silent. It had this complex sound profile. Walton described a very low, deep, thunderous rumble. But it wasn't necessarily loud in the conventional sense. It was more something you felt in your chest, in the ground, a vibration.
Like infrasound.
Possibly. Combined with that, there were also high-pitched frequencies, almost like electronic whines or harmonics, that seemed to get louder or change pitch as the craft moved or maybe powered up.
That dual sound,
Yeah.
low rumble, high whine.
Walton mentioned that technical students, engineers, physicists he spoke to later were always fascinated by that detail. Trying to figure out what kind of propulsion system could generate both those extreme ends of the sound spectrum simultaneously. It suggested something beyond simple jets or rotors.
And then Walton himself, he didn't stay in the truck, did he?
No, he got out. Compelled by curiosity or maybe something else, he ran towards the object.
Yeah.
Got really close, apparently ducking behind a log just maybe 8 or 10 feet away.
And that's when it happened.
That's when this beam, this intense energy discharge, shot out from the craft and hit him. Knocked him backward, unconscious.
The crew saw this.
They saw the flash, saw him go down, they panicked, thought he'd been killed, maybe vaporized. They drove off in terror, which, led to the whole missing person investigation when they reported it.
And that energy discharge, that contact, seems to be the start of his abduction experience, his missing time. But there's a twist to this location, isn't there? Something Walton found out years later.
Yes, and this adds a fascinating layer, potentially shifting the motive from just abduction to something else. Years after the event, Walton discovered that the specific area in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest where this happened has one of the highest rates of lightning strikes in the entire continental United States.
Really? More lightning there.
Second only to the Everglades in Florida, apparently. A natural hotspot for intense electrical atmospheric discharges.
Okay. Why would that matter to a UFO?
It led to what's called the fulgurite hypothesis.
Fulgurite, what's that?
Fulgurites, it comes from fulgur, the Latin word for lightning, are these amazing natural formations. They're essentially cubes or branching structures of glass. They form when lightning strikes sandy soil or silica-rich rock. The intense heat, millions of degrees for a microsecond, fuses the sand or rock instantly into glass along the path of the lightning bolt.
So lightning makes glass tubes in the ground.
Exactly. They're sometimes called petrified lightning. And they are unique geological specimens formed under extreme energy conditions. The hypothesis suggests that maybe the UAPs weren't just interested in Travis Walton or the loggers. Maybe they were interested in the location itself, specifically because of its high potential for creating fulgurites.
Why would they want fulgurites?
Well, the theory speculates they might be collecting them. These are unique crystalline structures formed by immense natural energy. Perhaps they hold unique energy properties. Or maybe the UAPs are drawn to these high energy locations for recharging or navigation or studying the geology. It reframes the encounter. Maybe Walton just got too close while they were resource gathering or studying these energy hotspots.
That shifts the perspective entirely, from random abduction to potential geological fieldwork or resource collection. Still terrifying for Walton, obviously, but a different implied motive.
Exactly. It adds this layer of environmental or resource-based interaction that we don't often consider. So you have all these accounts, right? Navy pilots seeing physics-defying objects, Walton encountering a craft possibly interested in light-infused glass, the Virginia entity seeming biologically distressed. When scientists, especially physicists working on the cutting edge, look at this stuff, they often run into a wall.
A wall of disbelief, or just lack of usable data.
More the latter, I think. You have figures like Dr. Harold White, who's genuinely exploring advanced propulsion concepts, things like manipulating the quantum vacuum, potentially warp drives.
Really out there physics.
Exactly. And he acknowledges these reports. Like the Tic Tac incident with Fravor and Dietrich are amazing, corroborated, compelling. But the kind of data they provide, eyewitness accounts, even radar tracks showing impossible kinematics, it's incredibly difficult to take that and directly plug it into a laboratory experiment you're running here on Earth. There's a disconnect.
He needs something repeatable, measurable in a lab setting.
Precisely. It requires a degree of scientific agnosticism.
Yeah.
You'd be fascinated by the reports, you can believe the witnesses, but translating that into equations or testable hypotheses for things like the polarizable vacuum theory, that's a huge leap. The data is just too anecdotal, too exotic for current experimental frameworks.
But White did try to come up with conventional explanations initially, didn't he? Like for the Tic Tac visual.
Yeah. Faced with these persistent reports of bright hovering objects, he explored possibilities within known physics and technology first. One idea he considered was the plasma projection theory.
Plasma projection.
Like a hologram, sort of. The idea was, could someone, maybe a military project, be using powerful, intersecting laser beams to ionize the air at a specific point, creating a pocket of plasma, superheated glowing gas that looks like a solid object floating in the sky, a three-dimensional display made of light and ionized air.
Okay, that sounds clever. Could that explain what the pilots were seeing?
It could potentially explain a bright hovering visual, something that looks solid but isn't really there. Sophisticated illusion.
But there's always a but.
Big buts. First, the scale.
Yeah.
The Tic Tac was estimated by Fravor and Dietrich to be about the size of their FA-18, maybe 40 feet long, though other estimates say 20 feet. Creating a stable plasma projection that large, holding it steady, the energy requirements would be astronomical, way beyond known laser capabilities probably.
Okay, scale is a problem. What else?
The appearance. Alex Dietrich's description of the Tic Tac surface was crucial here. She described it very specifically as being smooth, white, featureless, and distinctly matte. Like it had no sharp edges, almost like an egg or a Tic Tac mint, but with a non-reflective surface.
And plasma wouldn't look matte.
No, plasma inherently glows. It emits light. Think of a neon sign or lightning or the sun. It would be luminous, maybe shimmering, possibly translucent, a flat, matte white surface. That doesn't fit the physics of a simple plasma projection. That one key detail from a credible witness really undermined the theory as a complete explanation for the Tic Tac.
So the terrestrial explanation didn't quite fit the eyewitness details, which leads us inevitably to, well, the elephant in the room for decades in this field.
Area 51 and Bob Lazar.
His story from the late 1980s really set the template for a lot of the reverse engineering narratives we hear today.
It absolutely did. Lazar's core claim, as presented in the sources, is that he was recruited despite a disputed background to work at a secret facility near Area 51, a place called Site 4, or S4.
And his job.
His alleged job was to help reverse engineer captured alien spacecraft. He claimed there were 9 different crafts stored there.
9, wow. And the main source of controversy around Lazar has always been his credentials, right? His education, his previous employment.
Exactly. Verifying his academic record, his claimed degrees from MIT and Caltech proved impossible through official channels. His employment history, particularly at Los Alamos National Laboratory, was also initially denied or murky. This lack of official documentation has always been the main ammunition for skeptics.
But the sources we're looking at point to some later corroboration.
Yes. It's noted that later investigations, including work by journalist George Knapp, did uncover evidence supporting parts of his story. For example, his name appeared in the Los Alamos internal phone directory, and people who worked there confirmed his presence and knowledge of specific, non-public aspects of the facility and its work, things an outsider arguably shouldn't know.
So it's complicated. Official records are missing or denied, but anecdotal evidence and some circumstantial proof seem to back up at least his presence there.
It creates this friction, this ambiguity. Was he telling the truth about his work, even if his background was embellished or obscured? Or was he an elaborate hoaxer who just happened to know a lot?
Okay, let's focus on what he claimed he worked on. The technology, he talked about the sport model.
The sport model, that was his primary focus. He described it as a classic flying saucer shape, maybe 50 feet across, like a hubcap or a discus. Sleek, metallic.
And the power source, this is where it gets really specific.
Element 115. He claimed the craft was powered by a stable isotope of element 115, which, at the time he was speaking, hadn't even been officially synthesized or named. It's now known as muscovium, and is highly unstable. Lazar claimed they have a stable version.
Okay, a hypothetical, stable, super heavy element. And the propulsion, how did he say it worked?
This is the most crucial part, physics-wise. Lazar didn't describe rockets or jets. He described a system using this element 115 in a reactor to generate gravity waves. 3 powerful gravity emitters on the bottom of the craft, he said, could be focused. And by warping gravity, they could essentially warp space and time around the craft.
So it wasn't flying through space, but contracting space in front of it and expanding it behind.
That's the core idea he described, effectively creating its own wave in space-time to ride on. This allowed for incredible acceleration, right-angle turns without inertia, and potentially even interstellar travel by drastically shortening the distance.
And the significance is, back in the late 80s, nobody was really talking about warp drives or manipulating space-time like that in the public sphere, right?
Not widely, no. Concepts like the Alcubierre warp drive metric came later, in the mid-90s. For Lazar, supposedly a physicist but maybe without the top-tier credentials, to be describing these incredibly complex, theoretically plausible, though still highly speculative, propulsion concepts based on space-time manipulation, decades before they became mainstream discussion points.
Yeah.
That's the part that gives even skeptics pause.
How did he know that? Where did that specific advanced physics description come from?
That's the million-dollar question. Either he genuinely had access to information or technology far beyond the public domain, possibly non-human in origin, or he was an astonishingly prescient theoretical physicist masquerading as something else, who somehow predicted concepts that wouldn't be formalized for years.
It leaves you with that cognitive dissonance, doesn't it? The disputed background versus the seemingly advanced technical detail.
It does. And his story remains one of the most debated, influential, and controversial pillars of modern ufology.
Okay, one more case to touch on. This one is different again. High-level military witnesses, physical evidence, but the meaning of it, the purpose, seems completely opaque. Our source material even calls it breaking the guessing machine.
Yeah, that's the Rendlesham Forest incident, Suffolk, UK, December 1980, right next to 2 U.S. Air Force bases, RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge.
And the key thing here is the official involvement, right?
Absolutely. The witness credibility is arguably ironclad. We have a formal memo written by the Deputy Base Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, not some random guy, the second in command of the base.
And what did his memo confirm?
It confirmed that U.S. Air Force security personnel, under his command, observed strange lights in Rendlesham Forest, adjacent to the base, over multiple nights. Not just lights, but they pursued these lights into the forest and encountered something.
They saw an actual object.
Halt's memo and subsequent accounts from the men involved, like Jim Peniston, describe encountering a triangular-shaped craft landed in a clearing. Small, maybe 9 feet wide, 6 feet tall. Metallic surface. Lights.
And didn't they get close enough to see markings on it?
Yes. This is one of the most bizarre details. Peniston claims he got close enough to touch the craft and observed strange symbols etched onto its surface. He drew them later. One prominent symbol strongly resembled an ancient Egyptian hieroglyph, or maybe, as some sources note, the Hindu symbol Hamza.
A symbol like that on a craft in an English forest in 1980, that's unexpected.
Totally unexpected. And that's the core problem with Rendlesham, as the analysts point out. The witnesses are top-notch military personnel. There's physical trace evidence, indentations found in the ground where the object allegedly landed, burn marks on trees, elevated radiation levels measured by Halt himself later. The event seems real.
But the why is missing.
Completely missing, unlike aerial school communication or Virginia distress capture, or even the Navy sightings. Persistent observation, physics defiance. The actions of the Rendlesham UAP seem pointless, aimless.
What was it doing?
It landed in the woods. It seemed to observe the base from a distance. It left symbols. It had shot beams of light down, at one point allegedly into the weapons storage area, which is deeply concerning. But there was no clear message, no obvious threat displayed beyond proximity to a nuclear base. No attempted contact. Its behavior was just described as very peculiar. It didn't fit any easy category.
So it doesn't fit the patterns we see in other cases.
Not easily. It seems to lack a discernible context or intent. Was it reconnaissance? Was it leaving a message with the symbols? Was it a malfunction? Because the behavior is so hard to interpret, it resists being integrated into a larger model of UAP behavior or motivation. That's why it breaks the guessing machine. It's a solid data point that just doesn't compute easily alongside the others. Hashtag tag outro.
We have gone through a lot today. From that playground in Zimbabwe to the alleys of Virginia, the Nevada desert, the skies off the East Coast, Arizona forests, Area 51 whispers, and Rendlesham woods. Different times, different places, different types of encounters.
But when you step back and look at all these threads together, some powerful common themes really do start to jump out, don't they?
Definitely. The first one has to be the propulsion, the sheer defiance of known physics.
Absolutely. Whether it's Ryan Graves' pilots seeing objects hang perfectly still in 140-mile-per-hour winds, or Travis Walton feeling that deep rumble combined with high-frequency whines.
Or Lazar's claims about manipulating space-time itself.
The consistent story is movement and control that is simply beyond our current publicly known scientific understanding. Inertia seems optional. Aerodynamics seems optional. That's a huge technological gap.
And the second big theme, popping up again and again, telepathic communication.
Right. It's unavoidable. The kids at aerial school getting that clear environmental warning. The entity near Nellis conveying complex thoughts. Barbarians and murderers without intelligible speech. Even the creature in Virginia projecting its fear and need for help.
It suggests that maybe their technology, or perhaps their very biology, is fundamentally linked to consciousness in a way ours isn't. Communication isn't just verbal or radio waves, it's mind to mind.
It certainly seems to be a preferred or maybe even primary method in several key cases.
Okay, and the third thread, the one that ties the official response together across borders, the suppression. The immediate, heavy-handed, and often internationally coordinated efforts to contain the information.
Yeah, that pattern is striking. You see it in Virginia. The swift military recovery, the alleged transfer to the U.S., the MIB showing up with briefcases of cash to buy silence.
You see it hinted at in Nellis, with the wiped memories of the other witnesses.
You see it in the decades of official denial surrounding places like Area 51 and figures like Lazar, even when corroborating details emerge. You see it in the initial downplaying of the Rendlesham incident. The moment something tangible, a body, high-quality sensor data, credible high-ranking witnesses emerges, the security apparatus kicks in hard.
Globally. It's just a unified policy, almost, about keeping this stuff under wraps.
It strongly implies that, yes, containment seems to be the priority.
So the big takeaway for you listening, when you look at all these accounts, not in isolation but together, what emerges isn't simple. It really challenges that default assumption that UAPs are just a threat in the military sense.
Exactly. Yes, the capabilities are astounding, maybe intimidating, but the behavior described in cases like Ariel, Virginia, Nellis, it suggests more complex motivations. Communication, vulnerability, even moral judgment. It's not just about intrusion or surveillance.
The sheer number of witnesses, from kids to doctors to high-ranking military officers, whose testimony seems consistent and non-deceptive, it strongly suggests something profoundly real and likely non-terrestrial is interacting with us globally, operating in our controlled airspace, sometimes landing on our soil.
It does. And it forces a really uncomfortable question, doesn't it? If some of these encounters aren't hostile, if the entity in Virginia was genuinely scared and asking for help, if the beings at Ariel were delivering a warning about our own self-destructive path with technology,
then maybe the real perceived threat isn't the craft themselves. Maybe the threat, from the perspective of established power structures, is the message they carry.
a message that might challenge military authority, or question our industrial trajectory, or reveal a reality that undermines national security narratives.
So we leave you with this thought. If the purpose of some encounters, like the aerial warning or the Nellis entities discussed for barbarians, is fundamentally moral or philosophical, a critique of us,
Then how far would global governments, intelligence agencies, military powers, how far would they be willing to go to suppress that truth, to keep that message, that critique from reaching the public square? What level of evidence are they willing to deny? What stories are they willing to bury to maintain the status quo?
what is the ultimate cost of that silence? Something to think about.